Hi, Alex. It's so good to see you here in Athens, and thank you so much for contributing a chapter to our edited volume on the Greek military dictatorship. I know many people are intrigued about the role of Iakovos, Iakovos, as many would say about him. Tell us more about your chapter, and what was the role of the Greek Orthodox Church in the Junta dictatorship?
Well, thanks, Katerina. It was a pleasure to contribute a chapter on the role of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese and Archbishop Iakovos and their relationship with the junta, the dictatorship. I thought the chapter was going to be quite straightforward. I thought this is simple. As everyone knows, and you mentioned, after the end of the junta, all the newspapers, or at least the center-left newspapers in Athens, were calling Iakovos Iakovos, in other words, CIA Iakovos, accusing him of having, in a sense, been something like a CIA agent who was very closely associated with the junta. So I was quite sure I wouldn't find any CIA connections, but I said Iakovos is conservative. The church is a conservative institution. The junta was very used religion in its ideology, so this is going to be fairly straightforward. Mm-hmm. However, things turned out different. Initially, when the junta takes power in 1967, they've got close relations. And in fact, Iakovos brings the clergy-laity Congress, which takes place every 2 years in different cities in the United States, he brings it to Athens in 1970. And there's pomp and circumstance, there's public meetings, they go to the Herod Atticus Theatre and have an open performance, and Iakovos is sitting there with the dictators. So all that information and all the images suggest that we have a conservative leader of a church who is going to have a close relationship with an ultra-right dictatorship in Athens. However, the data shows that as the years went on, the relationship became less and less close. What the dictators hadn't bargained for was that Iakovos has got his own mind. Iakovos, and everyone who knows the history of the church in America knows that Iakovos was a very charismatic, autocratic leader with his own mind. He governed the way he thought was best. So he handled the relationship the way he wanted to, not the way the dictatorship did. Mm-hmm. So gradually, Iakovos was telling the dictators that they should be moving towards democracy. He was suggesting and recommending that the dictatorship lighten up, that they should be thinking about handing over power to the politicians. The dictatorship didn't take his advice kindly at all. Mm-hmm. And in 1973, things reached a head when Iakovos decided, enough of this, they're not taking my advice. I will write a letter to the State Department and call the dictatorship a tyranny. Wow. Needless to say, Iakovos makes sure that the letter is leaked to Greek-American journalist Nicholas Gage, who was working for the New York Times, and the New York Times publishes the letter in which Iakovos calls the dictators tyrants. So from 1973, for that last year, at least 1 year, the relationship actually got very, very strained. So overall, what I found was two things. First of all, it confirmed that Iakovos did what Iakovos wanted to do. The second thing was that the dictatorship really entered the relationship complacent, mm-hmm. with no idea, mm-hmm. no preparation, no plan whatsoever. They assumed that they would be getting support, and in the end they lost it.
Wow. It kind of reminds me that the junta, the colonels really had a hard time both with Makarios and Iakovos. I see many parallels, both taking on more political roles or hidden aspirations, as we see as Iakovos. What do you think?
Yes, isn't it a huge irony? Yeah. I mean, they have this slogan, Greece of Christian Greeks. They, in a sense, try and exploit religion and use religion for their own purposes. And when they're actually dealing with heads of churches which they cannot control directly, because obviously they can control the Church of Greece, but they can't control the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese. They can't control the Church of Cyprus. Coincidentally, we've got two extremely powerful leaders, ethnarchs, as the Greeks would call them, leaders of the nation, in Iakovos in the United States and Makarios in Cyprus. And they run up against those two, and the junta just doesn't know what to do with them.
Exactly. So I guess they were not puppets of the regime by any means.
By any means. Both because they would not be anyone's puppet, and the regime was totally incapable, actually, of making anyone their puppet if they didn't have direct control of them within Greece.
Wow. Well, I know that all of our readers are going to enjoy reading your chapter. I loved reading it when I was going through it, so thank you so much for writing it, and I know that we will all enjoy reading this as well as the other chapters, so thank you.
Thanks a lot, Katerina. My pleasure.